Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Underground QA Podcast, a podcast about quality assurance in the video game industry. My name is Chris, my pronouns are he, him, and we have three fellow QA professionals joining us today, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Ariel. Can we cut the music?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Ariel, and my pronouns are she, her.
Hi, I'm Myron, and my pronouns are he, him.
And hey, I'm Chelsea. My pronouns are she, her.
Hello, everybody. So happy to see all of your faces this morning. So today we are going to pick up where we last left off in our previous episode. We're going to talk more about test cases. All right, we're going to wrap up our chat about the whys of test cases, and then we're going to start dipping into the hows. So that means evergreen topics like reporting and analytics, but also the ever spicy topic, test case management solutions. Ooh. So I hope you're ready for this, and we're happy to have Chelsea to join us this week. I know you missed last time, but I think you know what's going on. So, lightning round, ready? So we want to do a quick recap, quick DLDR, previously on the Underground QA podcast.
Oh man, soap opera edition.
What do y'all remember from last time? Let's see. Let's go with Myron. What did we go over as far as like test cases and our whys?
Yeah, I think test cases and the whys. There's one key thing that you have to understand. There's a million things that you can write test cases for. When you're thinking about what the outcomes are and what you're trying to verify. And I would say the most important thing that I got from the previous episode, as a contributor and as just in general, is you have to understand like what the stakeholders are. Like, what is the definition of done? Like that is the key thing, and then you can write test cases for it. Because if you don't understand what the goal is of either the product team or whoever you're working with, then no matter how good the test cases are objectively, they're not going to hit the target.
No, that's true. That's true. Being aware of who you're doing this for and why you're getting them and stuff. That's fantastic. That's real good. How about you, Ariel? What was your your favorite takeaway?
One of my favorite reasons for using test cases is that it makes it really easy to work with more junior testers or people who have a little bit more distance from what you're testing. So that way you can have people who aren't specifically experts on the product or the feature that you're testing still conduct effective test cases because they have really clear like instructions and direction from the test cases. So it's a lot easier to hand a test to a more junior tester if the test cases are really thorough and explicit. Whereas if there aren't test cases or if the test cases are pretty sparse, then you would probably need to hand that to someone who's more familiar with the product so they can fill in the gaps.
Yeah, definitely being able to cater to who's actually running the test is important. Yeah. I definitely really appreciated discussing just like basic components of a test case because that can just, even though there is like a standard of what we all expect should be in there's a lot of different variants that people tend to look at. Like some people think, oh, we can just make it quick and dirty. We don't need a lot of this stuff. Like you said, like maybe Ariel with some of the test cases are missing a lot of information. Like really having a standardized way, and you have to give that to the person that is more familiar with the area, but having a more standardized way of like, this is what's in every test case. You always have this objective and preconditions, your steps to trigger, your expected results, your post conditions. Like for me, having everyone do something that is just almost exactly the same across the board with maybe like slight variance based on expertise is the most important thing, at least to me. Yeah. It drives me nuts when things vary wildly.
Chris, I just remembered that I was playing the role of the test artist last time, so I'm going to continue that persona today.
Yes, please.
We all like literally the thing that you just said, Chris. Well, it's random, but I'm paraphrasing, but like, so I'm the test artist, and I remember that. Sorry, Chris.
No, it's good. It's good. Somebody has to be the artiste, the one who's going to break the boundaries and push things out. And Chelsea, as someone who was a member of the audience last time, what was your takeaway here, or what was your favorite point?
I think my perspective is that data is probably one of the most powerful things we can bring, and as we mature as QA, there's a huge spider on my desk. As we mature as QA, hold on.
Chelsea is completely distracted right now.
We all learned that Chelsea's an arachnophobe, and she is. It's huge.
Oh goodness.
Do you
as
need
we
to get
mature,
a shoe or something? Or?
I will. One moment, please. But I'm going to finish my point here, and then you're going to see me run off camera for a second. My point is that data is probably one of the most powerful things that we can bring, and as we mature as a QA organization, it's massively important that we start to hone in on data that's important to us. So I think bringing all three of the things that you all said together and saying, like, how do we supply data that's powerful, that drives our story of quality and risk? That's where I think the magic is made.
Awesome. I love that. Consummate professional, even under pressure. Chelsea, thank you.
And I'll be right back.
That's terrifying. All right. So while Chelsea's out, we're actually going to do something a little different. We're going to do a double lightning round, and this is going to act slightly as a little bit of foreshadowing into later. So this is a question that I see gets asked a lot, and these two words get a little confused sometimes. Even I've confused it multiple times. Even after I've been through like ISTQB training and have to learn the definitions, I still sometimes swap them in and out. So a little bit of foreshadowing for later. Tell me, what is the difference between validation and verification testing?
What is the difference? Take it, Myron.
Yeah, Myron, you want to take a swing?
I'm like rubbing my hands together. Like,
I see you. I see you. You want to grab the reins? Do it.
So, as someone who suffered for, I would say maybe like 15 years of being told, look, fill out this V&V sheet that has all the steps and blah blah blah, and not understanding what verification and validation was. I'll start with validation. So validation is making sure that we're building the right thing. So for example, if the goal of the project is to reduce manual work by 65%, and we build something that works correctly, but the result is that 80% of the work will have to be manual, then that doesn't pass validation. Because no matter how you wrote it, no matter how well it works, if it doesn't complete the mission, it doesn't pass validation. So it's not a valid implementation.
So to put this into like game terms, you could say validation is like making, if the goal of making a feature, for example, is you want it to take 40 hours to like play through that content, for example, and someone plays it and it takes 10, then that hasn't passed validation. There's nothing necessarily wrong with it. It's just it's not doing the thing it's supposed to do.
Right, absolutely. Or like if you're building a game that's like a hip hop theme, and you wind up putting like songs by heart in there. They could be, you got your licensing correct. It like hits all the keys, like all of your events like work and with the soundtrack and the different sound options that you have.
So you have verified the functionality.
But like it's a hip hop game. Like I'm sitting here with my hat broke to the side. And I'm like, what are those? So it wasn't fun. It can be all right, but like suck. And so verification is like you said, Chris. You're making sure that it works right. So like when you specify what it's supposed to do, if 2 and 2 is supposed to equal 4, it's supposed to equal 4. That's verification. And that's my thoughts on that.
So I think to chime in here, if you've been watching throughout this seasons, you've heard me bring up my restaurant frequently, and we're going to turn it into a pizza restaurant. I think it's been a burger restaurant. I'm sure it's been something else as well.
But
a food truck
too, right?
Cupcake food truck. That's what it was.
Yeah. So today we're going to be pizza entrepreneurs, and so the reason why validation and verification are important are because we're trying to serve a consistent product, right? So if we look at it from the perspective of a pizza restaurant, verification is counting how many pepperonis are on the pizza and making sure that we are measuring out our ingredients and we're putting science behind it. And validation is making sure that once those ingredients are combined together, that it's good. And so that we have an important part in understanding that that equation. So if you put yourself as a quality assurance professional in the seat of making the pizzas, we may find out that we're putting way too much pepperoni on there. We may find out that we're not putting enough on there. And simply by having the two pieces of that data together, we can start to understand if tweaks are making a difference. And we can put the science behind that to really measure what good looks like. And so anyone who says that, and this is going to be controversial, that you cannot put validation testing inside of a test case management system is wrong.
Yeah.
Put a pin in that.
Yeah. and
Put a pin in it.
Yeah, I'll throw two things out there too. It sounded like you were describing qualitative versus quantitative as well, Chelsea.
Yeah, in a way I am. And that often tends to be the simplest lines when you're thinking about things from a verification and validation perspective. When we are asking ourselves qualitative questions, is it good? Was it fun? Does it promote togetherness? Those can be simple, of course, yes or no answers, but that doesn't mean that the answer is given to a simple pass or fail. We can also take a look at strata within there, components, all kinds of things. But again, verification and validation together make the important part of what we do.
There were a couple of good comments here in the chat. So one was from Sarah. There was a quote from QualiCon that said the difference is like between did we build the game right and did we build the right game?
Yep.
So
Yeah.
building the game right is verification. Building the right game is validation.
Yeah.
And then the pen said that qualitative versus functional tests to help, or they plan qualitative and functional tests to help separate test expectations when they receive a test case that needs to differentiate validation or verification.
Yeah. Yep. We can do practices. Oh, go ahead.
I think that it's hard to go to any company and find that they don't have verification tests. Like you that is sort of a given. But you don't. I've been at a lot of companies that don't have validation testing, and it often takes the form of, well, let's do a play test and see how we all feel about it.
Right.
Right.
Right. A lot of my time spending doing beat match level design and beat match testing was a lot of finding the fun and qualitative and like validation testing. It was just like, is this actually good? Does this really represent what the, like for my, at least my expertise was what the drummer was doing in the song? Or does this, like when I worked on another like motion kind of game, it's like, does this really represent, like, does this feel good to play? Does this motion going from this gesture into this gesture followed by this one, does this not only like feel good, is it physically possible to do? Like, is it emoting, like bringing out the emotions of the song of this area and kind of telling a story along with it? It was wild. So I tend to relate a lot of my previous experience to connect, like, this is validation, this is qualitative testing, and this is like how we know and why we know this is good rather than correct.
So can I ask kind of an interesting follow-up question here? What if you had your way, you know, I've alluded to the point that both are important, but is there one we should heavily index on more? Why? When? How? Like, if you only think about them as separate beings, should we as game professionals be indexing on one versus the other?
Now, I will tell you, just, and this is not a direct answer. It's just I'm throwing some more ideas out there.
This artiste.
Yeah, well, you know, like the quality artist thing. When you think about it, like in that role, like you were the quality artist, and that is, you know what it feels like to be a drummer. Tell us when you think this is good. I know in my first quality role, it was like, all right, you know the product, just tell us if you think it's good enough. And so it's interesting. I'm going to actually like continue thinking about this quality artist thing, because I think in some ways a lot of us wind up starting as quality artists. Like, you know what a good game is. You play like a lot of the questions are, have you played the games? What are you playing right now? Like, tell me, what did you like about that game? Blah, blah, blah. And it's like, all right, well, we may not index heavily on the verification and the credentialing of the quality practitioner or professional, and for reasons that we've talked about in this series. But let's just find someone that we believe is a gamer and just put them in there, and they'll be able to tell us if they think it's a good enough game or not, if it feels like a game or not. And that transition of going from a quality artist to a quality assurance analyst to a professional is one that's an interesting thing to think about. Sorry, Chelsea, you open up the engine for the quality artist.
This is definitely the longest flash of lightning ever. So
I just had to ask the question. Like it's something that I think about a lot. Because
good.
And I'll tell you why I asked the question. Maybe that'll help. In the game industry right now, we generally tend to see professionals being one or the other. They are verification oriented, which I will say generally tends to be engineers, and that is not a bad thing. Analysts get to choose their path. Are you going to specialize in more qualitative validation approaches or more quantitative engineering verification approaches? And so my point in asking that is we ourselves as professionals are being asked to pick a path. And is that the right approach? Do we lose something by being told to do one or the other?
Yeah, is it worth specializing in those directions instead of trying to merge them into one larger specialization?
Or do you understand where your intersect is?
Yeah.
Because we have a mix of it, right? Or we should. And I think maybe, and I'm definitely very guilty of this, maybe I've forgotten that validation is also of importance to me.
It can be easy to get stuck in the weeds there.
Well, I'm an advocate for strengths, and I think it is perfectly okay for people to pick. If you had noticed, now that we're like putting a lot more emphasis on quality and qualitative versus the validation and verification, I hold my hand up and I say yes, and I am absolutely a validation person. Because for me, verification tends to be a lot more homework.
Yep, bring it back.
And I respect people who absolutely love doing that every single day. And when I'm building a team, or I'm joining a team, or I talk to a team of people, I'm identifying who are the people that are not necessarily the people who have shut off the other piece. The point that you made was really important, Chelsea. They understand the intersection.
Yeah.
But they're like they when they work in their zone and they go home at the end of the day, they're like, man, that was the best day in my life. I actually found that this song, they added an extra beat that just didn't feel right, and they made a change, and I get to live with that legacy of fixing it all for the rest of my life. Like, that's what's up.
Yeah, man.
That
Thank
was
you.
not a one-word answer, but I acknowledge.
No, that's fine. That's fine. All right. So I want to put a pin in that. We're going to definitely circle back to this again and continue this conversation. This is important. But let's get back into test cases for a minute before we start talking about why we brought that question up. So executing test case is great. We execute and we have results. But what do we do with those results? We have a bunch of data. What do we do with that? How can we display that? What does it even mean? Like, great, did this pass or fail? Cool. But is there more that we can find in that kind of stuff? So let's move into like talking about what kinds of data we can get from the test cases we execute. Do you have any favorite ways that you like to display this data?
Oh man, Jira dashboard whenever possible, or some form of dashboard, right?
Yeah.
And I think the reason why is because I'm going to give you a little bit of my theory behind this. The more that we can take quality activities from being separate to being together, I think the better off we are. Now, I'm going to reference a conversation that's being had by Ariel and Ginger and Sarah in the comments here. So what's being said is we're talking about the green light, the go no go process. We're talking about kind of how test cases are useful. So we want to expose that data to as many people as possible. And so whatever system you choose, make sure that your data is accessible and frequently referenced. And here's the thing that I notice is that QA people who feel threatened tend to think that keeping that data to themselves is actually good for preserving their job integrity and their strength. In reality, transparency is the best thing that we can do. And so what I'll say is the data that serves your message should be highly transparent and visual to your team. So that's my first point. I'll come back after everybody else responds to if I see anything else. But for me, transparency is key.
How about you, Ariel?
Well, I mean, I definitely agree with some of the stuff that Chelsea was just saying there. Like, I hate creating or spending any amount of time on showing data or creating reports or doing any kind of like information gathering and preparing that is not consumed.
Yes.
And so I have found there's been a few times where I have been spending a ton of time on a report that no one was reading. And so I asked my boss, I was like, hey, can I stop writing this since no one is reading it and then I can do something else? And what I wound up doing instead was just I created a Jira dashboard, and like once a week I would, show it to the project lead and and just kind of run through it real quick. And that was way more effective at communicating the information than writing a report no one was going to read. So
yes,
it's hugely important to think about how is your data being consumed, not just how you're presenting it, because it really does matter to make sure that you are presenting all of your data in a way that people will actually care about it and read it.
Right. That makes sense. I also see the comments in here about the status emails. But like it's definitely like the way it's presented, because it's easy for those status emails to just get lost in the noise that happens, because so many people are blasting emails out all the time that you just kind of like, whatever.
I mean,
I don't want to read
there's a certain
another one.
like bureaucratic necessity of doing reports, right? Like at a large enough company, you just have to kind of do those things, but you can negotiate what the content of them is and how frequently you have to make them, how much time you have to spend on them. Because if you're spending like a ton of time writing like giant one-page reports that summarize testing results, but like everyone who looks at that report is just reading the too long didn't read line at the top, then don't spend all that time on that report. Like find a way to get out of it, because like you could be doing so many more useful things with your time, like actually testing. And what really matters is like we are information gatherers, right? And if we gather info and then no one cares about it, like can you just imagine how hard it would be if you were like an intelligence agent and you wrote all of these like really important intelligence reports, and then like the president just didn't read them even though they were specifically for him? Like that would be so absolutely frustrating.
Absolutely.
But it's very similar, because I always have thought about QA folks as being like scouts or intelligence agents. They're gathering information and passing it up the command chain to their generals or whatever. So yeah, just making sure that your data is actually being consumed and is not like you're not wasting your time gathering and collecting data that no one cares about.
Totally. One of the things that I really appreciate is having that history of the health of a product and how it's been, where you can look back and be like, well, we tested this here for this period of time. It was totally fine. And then it broke here, but now it's fine again. We can zero in on this area and have a lot easier time like finding more important issues. Be like, what was that blip? What was going on in that time period? Did we stop doing something? Was there a change that went in and then was backed out that we aren't aware of, that maybe we thought wasn't connected to our this feature set, but actually is. And we can do like more investigative deep dives into that, and then find that information and actually have more pointed emails saying, hey, this is what we found. You should do something about it.
Yeah, I think like Ariel, to reference what you and Chris are talking about, and to use a phrase that I love, is like, reports are not there to supplement some machines spitting out of data. And I think that that's what I see most frequently, especially that's why I wrote status emails are the devil, because all status emails are usually is just machine spit out of thing. And we have to remind ourselves that we are humans with human brains, and that is where the money is made. That is where we secure our jobs. And so, like you said, if the TLDR is what people are reading, then you did a thing and you should hone in on that. Right. That's great. You're doing your job. And then you're using discretion and saying, and I don't need to put all the rest of this stuff in there. I think that that's great. Like, also, I will say the other thing is, let the data speak for itself in visuals.
Yeah.
And so, for instance, heat maps, man, they're good. Use them. If you're not doing them, if you don't know how, please ask, because visualizing that data is better than you could ever say in words. And then you can say, look here. And if we have history on it, it's even better, because heat maps, just to note, are a point in time, right? And so we're referencing problems in point of time. We're trying to see where the fire is.
Can you actually explain heat maps? I think there might be some folks who don't know what those are.
Yeah. So a heat map is any visualization where we add in color and size, usually, to denote problems. Hey, the fire is in this part of the building. The heat is in this part of the building. And so heat maps can be done in many different ways. Think about how to stratify your data. And that's how we can come up with what our heat maps are. So, for instance, component is a very common place where we use heat maps, because components tell us where we're injecting defects or where we're injecting risk. We could use heat maps for risk analysis. Where are our highest risk items? And if you're doing risk analysis and coming up with a number, we can use those numbers to show where that is. We can use heat maps for showing where the bulk of our testing is. So if you're trying to look for where problems are or where things are, that's what we can show.
One of my favorite examples of heat maps that I saw used by QA was the talk for Horizon Zero Dawn at GDC a few years ago.
Oh my gosh. Y'all, watch that talk.
Quinn's talk
Great
is
talk.
Fantastic. And what they used were, they did a heat map of the entire map of Horizon, and it pinpointed where bugs tended to congregate. And it was unbelievable. I remember sitting there with a couple of my team members at the time. Our jaws were just on the floor. And it was one of the coolest examples. So if you can see that, find that talk. Here's a quick shout out. Go find the Horizon Zero Dawn QA talk from GDC 2018.
I just linked it in chat here.
Excellent.
But yeah, it's on YouTube actually. It's called Horizon Zero Dawn, a QA open world case study. It's from 2018. That's the one you're talking about, right?
Yep, that's the one.
Okay,
Quinn did an excellent job there.
Yeah.
So can I go to a question that Patrick just asked, because I think that this is a good one.
I think so.
So Peric asked, what about the situation where your team can't hold itself to the quality bar? You as QA are providing the visibility to stakeholders and the team, yet no actions are taken. It's easier for a stakeholder to blame the QA person for low quality instead of requiring the team to push harder and meet the standards. Any tips for not falling into that place? Okay, so here's what I would say. And then everyone else, feel free to chime in. If your quality bar is too high for your team to hold itself to, you must ask yourself if it's the right quality bar. Yeah. I think that that's the first question, because let's say we're trying to hit 60 frames per second, for instance, but we are still a year away from release. Is it important that we actually hit 60 frames per second a year ahead of release? That's a very different question if we're a live product, right? And so hitting 60 frames per second is imperative because there could be some form of degradation
Exactly.
or regression. So then in that case, what I would say is, instead of adjusting it like we would have a year ago and maybe saying, all right, maybe we'll hit 45 and that'll be our quality bar. If we have to hit 60 and that's our quality bar and we're not going to, what you can do as a QA person is elevate that risk as soon as you know. And it is why test cases are so important, because you can say we didn't hit that bar, right? What I would say is we are not being transparent enough with data and risk if we're having that. What do y'all think?
No, that makes a lot of sense with being able to have like the results of the test cases. You have that historical knowledge, like we're not hitting that. Here's the data to prove it. We haven't hit it for this extended period of time. So something's not being addressed and it's not us. Like we found this thing, we're taking care of it. Here you go. You got to fix this.
Or check-ins could point to it, right? Like we may even be able to say like this check-in did the thing.
Yeah,
if we have good enough systems in place.
Right. And I would say like one of the things that's really important is that your team, that the team outside of the quality team understand like the rationale for the quality bar. Because it sounds so I'm pretty sure we've all been in this place where we say, here's the data, here's this, here's that, and they still go, not good enough. Like I didn't agree to this. Like who are you to delay this release when I didn't know that this is the quality bar? Like why didn't we have a conversation on this quality bar? Like you're not gonna blow us, actually you can't come to the event. Like we're gonna make sure that you don't get to talk to anyone because you're not on the team. Why are you against us? Why do you hate it here? So
I feel like somebody hurt you in this regard, Myron.
I'm just, and so like it's really important to, I call it decisioning, but it's really important that people understand the rationale for what you deem to be good enough. And like they understand, like they can, like we're talking about transparency, they should know also. They should be able to look at the data and be like, we're this close.
Yes.
And like split the screen and like you're literally like in a different place with different lighting. Like we're this close and like y'all are both talking about the same thing. Like that's so important. And then you get to say stuff like, actually, that quality bar was too high or that quality bar is too low. And chances are, if the other stakeholders are just as aligned and they're watching it as much as you are, they'll be like, yeah, you know what? Actually, yeah, that was ridiculous. Let's move it. Let's fail faster. Let's say that was not the right thing, and this is the right thing.
Yeah. I also I feel like the question here, it says it's easier for a stakeholder to blame the QA person for low quality instead of requiring the team to push harder. Like that to me sounds like there's something a little bit dysfunctional about the way that team is being run, right? Like because I don't think that it is useful to play the blame game. Like it's certainly good to try and like do postmortems and try and understand where things went wrong. But if something goes wrong and someone's first response to that is like, well, whose fault is it? Like that is the wrong question to ask, right? Like if it's somebody's fault, that will come out later, right? Like instead you can just approach it from, well, what specifically went wrong? Not you don't need to single out a specific person as being to blame. Because like let's say you had a tester who messed up and didn't do something right? Well, is that their fault or is that our fault because we didn't train them correctly, right? Like that is an entire separate question of who is actually to blame. Forget about it. What went wrong?
Yeah, that's what went wrong? How did we get there? How can we correct it? And then you can do a post-mortem and figure out all those other things.
So yeah,
the thing's broken. Find them and destroy them.
Yeah. So in the case of this specific question, I would say, well, like we've been saying, either the quality bars are wrong or the team needs to change its approach so that they can meet them. And that's a hard conversation to have. But it's an important one.
Cool. Thanks for the question. That was a really good one.
Thanks,
all right.
Perry.
So yeah, thank you so much. Now let's move on to something a little less spicy, a little more chill. So we're talking about creating test cases. We're talking about how what they executing them in the data we can pull, but we should probably talk about how we can organize this stuff. So let's talk about test case management and test case management systems. So talk to me, friends. How would you define test case management? What would you say that is?
Anything that records results of testing. So I would say, our most primitive version of this is a notepad or an Excel sheet with pass or fail in it.
Excel's primitive? How dare you?
I'm sorry, get on that G Suite, please.
Yeah, that actually is more primitive than Sheets. Don't at me. Than Excel. Sorry, Excel is like the older brother to Sheets.
Never mind. This is a very spicy topic. Excuse me. There's opinions abound.
No. I'm all about Sheets. I'm all about Sheets.
And Sheeps.
And
Sheets and Sheeps. So it's important.
Sheets.
So I know, like, for me, like, when I've thought of test case management like systems and thing, I tend to immediately think of the software. But like, it's good to think it's not just like this. Oh, I use TestRail. Oh, I use Zephyr. It's more just like it's what you do and how you organize your test cases and your results in order to like categorize and keep record of the data and display the data and report it out as needed.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Myron.
Sorry, Chris. I would say I would define test case management like as a practice. So first of all, I would consider it to be a practice or like a skill, or a skill tree even. And when I use test case management, I use it primarily to organize a team around a strategy. So for example, if I'm trying to release as much to live as possible, then my strategy is going to be different than if I'm trying to release like something that's very, very important and I have a blank check to make sure that the quality works. So it depends, but a test case management is again a skill tree, a set of tools that I use to organize a team or an organization around a strategy to get a product, to bring a product to life.
I love it. Let that sit for a little while.
I think a lot about like, there's some pretty common test case management systems. What I will say is like the differentiation, and I know that this is spicy and I see the conversation going on. Look, if you need to look at, without doing a ton of manipulation in spreadsheets, if you need to look at data beyond a single point in time, it is much easier to have a test case management system that is not a spreadsheet. And look, someone's going to tell me, yeah, but I made this amazing macro sheet. Yeah, I get it. But guess what? When you leave that company and you made that amazing macro sheet, you're going to leave behind you a wake of destruction that is irreparable.
Yeah, it's like the day after tomorrow.
Oh yeah.
It's like,
I have lived that life.
The wave of like, you can like hear the cold, like
yes.
Yeah.
Like it sounds like a tiger.
Yeah, I've literally been left this magic spreadsheet that records all the things, and it integrates in 7,000 places. Look, I love you for doing that. You smart as hell. But you're leaving behind, if you don't spread out that tribal information of how that spreadsheet works, you're leaving behind an irreparable wake, again, of destruction.
Yep.
Because something's going to happen, a cell is going to change, and it's going to cause ripples that affect much more than you.
Yep. A different label is going to get used. It's just even the tiniest thing.
Also, imagine if you were coding in a non-IDE, like in Notepad, and then magically inserting that code. When we don't use test case management systems, we degrade the performance of what our discipline can do. And I know that that is also a spicy statement that I just made. But if you're not demanding the tools for your trade, you're not demanding the respect that your discipline requires of saying, I need to track quality metrics in a professional way.
Yeah.
Not even accountants just use Excel. There is not a profession that does not have some form of specialization. You're instantly removing that. Again, spicy. I'm going to tell you right here.
Woo.
Well,
I'm spicy about this.
I think that using Excel and Sheets to do test case management is like creating your own test case management tool. So there's a lot of pros of doing that, right? Because you can set it up the way you want it to. And if you're particularly knowledgeable and smart, you can make it do a lot of things that test management software might not be able to do, right? But there are no other experts on a tool that you make unless you train them. So like doing something like that requires that you avoid what Chelsea is talking about and actually teach people how to use that tool that you made, as opposed to a test management software which will have like tutorial videos and seminars and how-to guide and frequently asked questions and a support, like customer support and all of this stuff. There's all of these like resources to better understand how the tool works and make sure it's working correctly, right? You just don't have that for Google Sheets or Excel. So
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Myron.
There's one thing too I want to bring out here. It's your friendly reminder. So we said test case management and test case management systems for a reason, and I actually mentioned in the comments not TCS. Don't use TCS. Microsoft TCS. Anyway,
you nerd.
But you can't just install a test case management system and have test case management. Like, remember earlier we talked about you have to make sure that people understand the rationale. Like, what are the research questions that have gone into you building your quality bar? Like people need to understand simply. I think we're ready to go when all the tests are run, all the bugs are prioritized, and I know, for example, this is what I do. I know that it's going to take the team roughly a day to fix any level of bug. That's when I'll recommend that we're ready to go. And it's a recommendation because the product team and the producers and the stakeholders, they're in that room and they're the ones that are making the decision based on our information to go. We launch as a team. Anyway, test case management system. You're not going to install quality on Saturday.
I mean, but it's Sunday.
We gave it 2 days. What are you talking about? We gave it Saturday and Sunday. I thought we did all that we needed.
Ooh, ginger with the salt. I would install it on Friday at 5 p.m.
Yeah! See, everyone's been there. Everyone's been there.
This is actually one of the things that I like to talk about in interviews now. Is so. Do you release on Fridays? I'm just curious. Because if they say yes, then that's a place where you'll have to work on the weekend. It's
man.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Oh wow. So we kind of dipped into it a bit, but like there are other like test case management tools that we can use that, for systems and different softwares that we're familiar with. I saw noted in the chat, DevTrack. There was a shout out there. And I know I personally have used like Zephyr and TestRail as test case management like tools and systems. So like why shouldn't we just keep using spreadsheets? We kind of dipped into it a little bit of just like, first of all, you're leaving a wake of destruction. You don't want to do that with your fancy spreadsheet that records everything, because not everybody knows your brain and your macros. But then there's also just like, you have your spreadsheet that is just did it pass? Yes or no? Great. Now what do you do with that info? Like when do you get to the point where you're like, I need one of these software solutions? And what would make you think which software solution you should go for?
I think that's a good question, Chris, because like Excel testing is not always the wrong way to go. I know that
I do a quick and dirty check and you're like, all right, I'm going to just put up a quick spreadsheet, run it through, especially if you're doing like real quick development one-on-one with an engineer, just trying to get iterations done quick to slam it into a build. Quick spreadsheet, call it a day.
So here's where I'll tell you that that's my very strong line of of when that ends.
Mm-hmm.
If you need to run that test case more than once, like let's say we're trying something out and we decide next week that it's important, okay, it's time to get out of Excel.
There it is, immediately.
Immediate, boom. And here's why. Because I want to be able to connect results from run 1 and run 2 together. And that is when Excel, you start to have diminishing returns. Because Excel is a point-in-time tool. We've talked a lot about point-in-time. If you've used Grafana, Grafana is a point-in-time tool. If you have used, I'm trying to think of other things that are really good point-in-time indicators. Generally, if you're looking at a code repository, that's a point-in-time tool. What is in my code repository at this point in time, right? We're not looking back at history. We tack tools onto things to start to understand more complex questions. Also, you can't assign components easily in Excel. So the moment that you start to want to ask, where are we seeing most of our problems? Where is most of our risk? That's when you should start thinking about something. And so here's what I would say in how, and then I'll pass off because I'm just going to give it to you all in one chunk. How do you pick out your test case management system? Where does it integrate for you that's important? For me, it is important because my team uses Jira that there is a Jira integration. And that Jira integration not only includes defects, but implements into my work system so that I can show in an agile way what the team is doing. And also has a way of showing changes. So for me, that's my line, right? Because from there, I don't necessarily have to have all the reporting of Jira because quite honestly, Jira reporting is not great. Jira dashboards are great. But Tableau, Easy BI, I think there's another BI named system. Those are great for getting the data out. Again, tacking on tools where they're needed to make sure we're specializing. So that's my perspective. Myron, what do you think?
I would say absolutely yes. What I said in there, I was like, the biggest thing for me, because everyone's using Jira, and they're like, we're using Jira, and I have these conversations with the technical director, the technical architect, solution architect, and the developers. They're like, yeah, we just need one result for the entire suite of tests, right? No. Unless you want me to start writing bugs on an entire build, just one bug, no worky. So that's the biggest. So like literally everything you said, Chelsea. Like the thing I was gonna say was, you need to integrate with the team, because like I said before, when I call a go no go meeting, everyone's ass is gonna be in the seat, and so I find it to be my responsibility to make sure that I am working the closest to all those other people as possible.
Yep.
This is where the integration is super key.
Yeah.
If someone is using Git,
otherwise it's not an integration.
Exactly.
It's silos.
Yes, silos.
So one of the things that just for a radical change of pace here. So one of the things that I personally really like test case management tools for is I care a lot about making sure I am not wasting time running test cases that don't matter. So one of the things that's really nice about test case management software is you can look at the history of a test case. And so you can look to see like, hey, this is a test case that frequently finds bugs, and they're frequently different bugs. So that is a useful test case to me, right? Because it is producing useful information. And then you might have test cases that fail every time you run the test.
Yes.
So why do you have that test case is my question. Because you already know it fails. It fails every time. Has that ever actually blocked you from like shipping that feature, or is it just that this is like one of those things that the test case was kind of written without a clear understanding that this wasn't an important issue or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And then there's cases where you might have a test case that has been run 100 times and it has never failed, right? Do you want to keep running that test case over and over again, right? And those are
You read
questions.
my mind.
Those are questions that you cannot answer without test case management, because you can't easily see the history of a test case.
Yep.
So, for example, if I wanted to run a test, but I knew I didn't have enough time to run the whole thing, right? Like I might say, all right, well, let's just run the high priority test cases, which is another thing a test case management software can do, is you can assign priorities to test cases. You can do that in Google Sheets too, by the way. It's more time consuming. But anyway, so that's a thing that you can do. And you can say, I'm only going to run the high priority test cases. Also, I want to run the test cases that frequently fail and find interesting bugs. So I'm going to throw those in there too, right? And I know which ones those are because I have traceability. And I can look back and see which ones are producing bugs. And I'm going to skip all the test cases that always fail because I know it's going to fail this time. I don't need someone to tell me it's going to fail because that bug is still there and it's still causing that failure. So just ignore that one. And now I've saved a whole bunch of time. I can run my test, and I'm not going to spend a bunch of time running test cases that I don't actually care about. I'm going to focus on the ones that actually matter. That's just like a whole bag of a thing that you can do with a test case management software. You just can't do it without it.
No, I'm glad you brought it up, especially with the point about test cases always passing. That you end up, that's where you start dipping into like the pesticide paradox, where you're just like, well, it's always green, so everything's fine, but you're not actually looking into the areas that need to be looked at. You're just assuming everything's fine.
If you are always passing, I'm going to challenge you and tell you that secretly you are failing somewhere.
Yeah.
And that may be in qualitative, like in validation. Let's also be honest with that.
I do want to say real quick, there are test cases that you want to run every time and they will hopefully pass every time, but they're the kind of like, super important, cannot like ship without making sure this test case works. Like
your
don't
critical checks, your white gloves.
You don't just want to take everything out that always passes, right? Like you want to leave the critical stuff. But for the not so critical stuff, right? There's probably some room to remove some of that.
Payments, right?
That monthly payment, yes.
Oh my God.
And I'm not saying that from the perspective of the company needs to make money, but that you need to protect the player, right? We're not double charging people's accounts. We're giving them the currency that they deserve.
They're talking about my world. Gotta make sure that shit works all the time.
Ginger said sanity and smoke with golden or critical paths. Yes.
Exactly.
If you don't have a golden path, please get one. If you don't have personas, please figure those out, because those are so critical for your understanding of quality and having the conversation. Hey, let's sit down with the producer and the engineer and figure out what our golden path is. Because I guarantee there's going to be a little bit of misalignment there. Figure out your golden paths. There may be a few because you may have different personas.
Yeah.
And let's go through that.
Weasley, I think their name is, asked what are personas. So personas are like the idea that there are like, at least my understanding is that there are like different kinds of people who use a product, right?
Yes.
So in MMOs, for example, like people frequently talk about how there are different styles of players, right? There are explorers, there are achievers, there are social people, and then there are killers. And like killers tend to be the people who are really into PvP. Explorers like to do like everything. They want to see everything. Social people are just there to hang out with their friends. Achievers want to like get the best thing or do something that nobody else has done, or beat the game as fast as they possibly can. All of those people play the game differently, so their golden paths don't look the same. Because the killer is going to skip straight past all of the like story content and dive straight into PvP as soon as they're able to. They're gonna like skip past all of those dialogues and all those cutscenes. They don't care. Just get me to where I can start murdering people, right? Whereas someone who's there for the story is going to like watch every cutscene. So if you have a golden path that assumes that everyone is a explorer, then you might not say try skipping cutscenes, which is something that a different kind of player would do, right? So you like, there's just things that you'll miss if you only test from a single perspective is the idea.
Yeah, I think they're important because we should be sitting down and talking about these folks commonly in our conversations with our team. And you can even have internal personas too, right? You can kind of develop personas that are internal product usage. And that's helpful when we're talking about tools. Hey, what would someone who works in the code base need? And we can start to develop that, and that can lead to better onboarding. So personas are important no matter where you are. Absolutely. Myron linked a really amazing slide presentation, I think, that explains it. But just to go back to it, you don't decide the persona. Your team decides the persona. And when in doubt, you don't even need to be necessarily in that conversation. Your producer needs to do that. At the very least, the business owner of the product needs to decide the personas. Again, that's going to be spicy. You as quality assurance do not own the personas. Right. It is very important.
Right.
Because it's not just
consultant, maybe.
Yeah, because it doesn't just affect quality, right?
Yes.
Like it doesn't just affect quality. It also affects, like, are all of the people you're trying to satisfy with your game being satisfied, right? Like if you build a game that is great for PvPers, well, have you done the validation testing to make sure that it is also great for social players who just want to hang out with their friends? Have you made it easy for them to do that, or is getting into a party a giant nightmare?
Make sure that the personas are important, because and that's why the producers need to decide that, because Ariel's point of social players, we may get data from our data folks that say that social players spend a ton because they want to look great and be around our team. And so that may be a big focus. So again, having universal personas is key, because we can say, like, hey, commerce team, how much do these type of players spend? And we can start to narrow down, again, components, utilizing data, getting things together. We can start to understand that, and we can have a better idea of what the quality experience is. And honestly, if you're in an indie that is concerned with, hey, how much are we getting per player, it may be important for you to focus on those smaller persona chunks and not the player.
Yeah.
Right. And when you're out of time, right? Like, hey, you have hardly any time. Okay, cool. I'm going to go to the persona, and I'm going to use that, which is, again, a group, because that the producer is going to be in the go-no-go meeting with me, and we're going to make a recommendation, but they're signing off that they're ready to take that to market. That is their product, and you're on the product team from that perspective, or on the, you're a part of that team that's launching that experience. And so it's so important. Persona can answer a lot of the questions, and they are absolutely inputs to your golden paths.
Imagine putting your test case management system in that, having that as a component as well, right? It's another thing. If you have a really great system, you can attach a label. You can attach a custom field that shows the persona that you're working with. You could do that with all of your defects for traceability. You could do that with all of your user stories for traceability. And this is a way that you, as a quality assurance professional, can begin to pull all of the ecosystems together to understand, to reference the spider earlier, when we move the spider web over here, it affects things over here.
Nick in chat had actually just made a very similar point to that, he's actually been dropping a whole bunch of useful comments in there. So if you're listening to this podcast, I want to recommend that you watch it so that you can actually read the Twitch comments, because there are a lot of really smart people in there who are making a lot of really juicy knowledge drops.
Awesome. All right, friends. So what I'm going to do now, that was a great tangent there that was still very relevant, because understanding user stories and different player personas are how we can help create our test plans and inform the rest of the team of what's going on. So I'm going to start moving into something to kind of bring us home, and I'm going to reference back to our initial defining of validation testing. So a question out for the three of you. So how can we accomplish validation testing through our test cases?
Okay. So how can we accomplish validation testing? Well, exploratory testing is a really amazing way to start to look at this. Now, not all exploratory testing is validation based, but what I would challenge you to think of is that we should be thinking of exploratory testing more from a validation lens than from a finding problems lens.
Okay.
And so let's say we put an exploratory test with some general outlines of steps inside of our test case management system. Or not even steps, just areas to hit. Hey, we want to fast travel. Hey, we want to do a transaction. We want to change a skin. And after that, the rest is up to you. Get an achievement. Get into a match, right? If we start to think of tools like that, the exploratory tools of how did it feel at the end, and understanding that pass from a validation perspective just means that we did the thing, or fail means we have a moral objection to what's going on. And we put in the comments, hey, this felt really good. I would give it this experience. We can start to utilize testing and test case management from a very strong validation perspective. But remember that you can't outline every single step for validation. That's not what you're looking for. And so maybe if you take the explorer's approach, the exploratory, the halo kind of approach of things, you might start to get more out of that validation data.
Yeah, like when you were saying that, Chelsea, I was just thinking to myself, would you recommend a friend buy this for $7?
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like, would you actually tell your friend, yo, it's dope, like, it's worth it? You know what I'm saying? Like, validation can absolutely be captured in tests. Now, I left off test cases to leave the rest for you to discover. So Chelsea said exploratory testing. There are a number, and there are some people in the Ginger. He said, exploratory based time session. So so I'm not gonna get into semantics, but you can absolutely capture it. I actually really love, because I'm more of a quality artist and I live for validation. And so I like using acceptance test driven development, which the testers or the product people focus on, like, actually validating the story.
Yes.
And like doing cycles before implementation. So acceptance test driven development. There's an amazing book by Ken Pugh. I'll leave it at that. That's my word for this segment.
Ariel, you got some final thoughts here?
Yeah, so a lot of my experience with validation testing has been based around doing playtests. And I've kind of expanded how I approach doing playtests so that I can do a playtest that is essentially a validation test. So I'll give you an example. Like, for a lot of playtests I will have like a specific topic we're looking at, a set of instructions for how I want people to play through, and like some ideas for what I want them to try and do as and like a persona of how I want them to play. So might be like, today we're doing the explorer's playtest. I want you to go through this level and I want you to explore every nook and cranny and kill every single monster on it. And then at the end, like, did you feel like talk about, like, did you feel like there were interesting things to find and do exploration of? So what I started doing is I started having playtests that are just for QA. So like the all team playtests, for example, those happen like, once a week for like an hour or something like that. And we get the whole dev team to kind of chime in with their thoughts. But instead what I'll do is I'll work with the developer, like, all right, I'm going to have QA do like a 4-hour playtest or something like that. Let's come up with a list of questions that we want them to answer. And those questions are kind of like test cases, right? There's the overall instructions for the playtest. Do these things. And then there is the questions that we ask. Like, was it fun? Did you enjoy it? Did you feel like this need was being satisfied? That kind of thing. And then we can pass those results back to the relevant developer. And I feel like that is a more accessible way of doing validation testing, because people can kind of wrap their heads around a play test. Whereas if I tell them I'm going to do a validation test case, like, it doesn't quite make as much sense to them. I have found. Not enough spicy answer. I just saw it in chat. I assume they're talking about me. Let me see if I can spice it up a little bit. No, I'm just kidding.
I think it was in response to actually my text answer, sadly.
Yeah.
But seriously, I think playtests are a great way to do validation testing, and you can do them with just QA. Like, you don't have to have a whole broad team playtest.
I like that. All right, friends. Thank you very much for jumping into that. And thank you so much for joining us today, everybody else. This has been a fun conversation with some really good tangents. And I think we all got a lot of good information today. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate you all joining in. So let's jump into our little bit of fun time here. Ariel, I believe you had something you wanted to talk about for the bug of the cast. I think there was something you wanted to dip into, and I'd love to hear it.
Okay, so this is kind of a fun one. So I'm an EVE Online player. I'm a huge EVE Online nerd, and I live in an area of wormhole space called Wormholes, or an area of the game called Wormhole Space.
Okay. And
in Wormhole Space, there are all of these wormholes that connect the different systems in Wormhole Space to each other, and those systems can open and close like all the time. The game had a very specific, or has a very specific kind of wormhole that is restricted by size. So only like the smallest ships can fit through it. Mm-hmm. And what was happening is there was a bug that allowed people to force larger ships through that wormhole, which would then cause it to collapse. It wasn't supposed to do that. These were supposed to be uncollapsible wormholes. So what was happening was people could seal off a system by collapsing all the wormholes and prevent people from getting into it, even though this specific kind of wormhole was not supposed to be collapsible.
Oh, wow.
And that just became part of the meta. Like, everyone did this for like years. This was just
years.
This was just the thing that everyone knew you could do. You can force an oversized ship through a hole and collapse it. And it was a bug.
And it forced this thing to do a functionality of its type that it wasn't supposed to do. Yeah. And it was just sitting there for years and just became the meta.
Yeah. So it radically changed the way this entire area of content called evictions, which is where you kick someone out of their home system in Wormhole Space. Evictions became a lot harder to do because if you can't force those holes closed, you can't control who gets in or out of the system while you're trying to evict everyone from it. Mm-hmm. So at one point, CCP, while a very large group was in the middle of doing a very big eviction, changed the rules. And now they fixed the bug so you couldn't close those holes. And they had some that popped up, and because of that, they had a huge influx of people in small ships who could just go through the hole without being stopped. And it completely changed the outcome of that eviction. And so the players are genuinely upset that this change was made, because the bug had been around so long that it had, in their mind, become a part of the design of the game.
Right.
So CCP did not fix a bug; they changed a feature. And while CCP might insist, no, we fixed the bug. It was always a bug. No, it was always a bug for years. So, and that is a big difference, right? So there's this thing called the CSM in EVE, where it's a council of players that advises CCP, and one of the core campaign points for wormhole CSM candidates is that they want this sprig hole change to be rolled back, or at least something done about it.
Yeah.
There's a president, right? I was about to say, what's the president think about it? The CSM, there's a leader, right? Or is it just a council of people?
It's a council of 10 people who are elected by the player base. So every paid account you have gets to vote once. Which means that people who own lots of accounts get to vote lots of times.
Oh my god!
But yeah, it's sort of interesting to think about how a bug that exists in a game for a really long time changes players' behavior, right? Because they start to behave in a certain way because that bug is there. And then they can get so used to the way the game works with that bug that it actually becomes a feature. It's a part of the game now.
Mm-hmm.
And so to change it is no longer fixing a bug. It is changing a feature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
so
removing
you
a
have to go back to
feature
your
from the game.
personae, right? Like in that case, Eve is a really, really important case because there's actually like, if y'all are familiar about what the Benghazi incident, there was actually a diplomat that passed away in that attack, and he was logged into Eve. And so there are worldwide, like, actual diplomats, politicians that are in Eve because one of the issues is because it simulates real economies. I actually used Eve for my final projects for macroeconomics and my advanced finance class in undergrad, because it runs like a real universe, like with politics and corporations, and it's fascinating. So they're gonna have to reevaluate their personae on that one.
Yeah,
and roll that shit back.
Well, there are some changes that they can make to make it easier. So one change that or better, and one change that people have suggested is that these kinds of holes should only go between two wormhole systems, because part of the problem is people are coming from outside the wormhole ecosystem into these evictions. But instead, if it was only wormhole to wormhole, there wouldn't be a way for them to easily just come in and blob the crap out of the evictors. So it'll be interesting to see what CCP does, but I think that they will definitely have to do something, because wormholers are pretty unhappy about it.
Wow, that is amazing. I like that it's a story about a bug that became a feature, and now removing that bug is now removing a feature.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Ariel. All right, friends. I think that's going to do it for us today. I just want to thank Myron and Ariel and Chelsea once again joining us and having an awesome conversation and interacting with our Twitch chat. And we want to thank everybody who joined us on the stream today. Thank you so much. There was some great chats going on there, some comments going back and forth. Really appreciate our community. So if you have any suggestions for future topics or bugs of the day that you would like to have us discuss and have us on the podcast, like, please let us know, because we'd like to hear them. And if you're a QA professional and you would like to be on the podcast, we would love to hear from you. But in either case, please contact us at undergroundgameqaconf@gmail.com, or you can reach out to at undergroundqa on Twitter. Or you can also check us out in our Discord server. I know there's a bunch of you that are on that now. We blew up
this week
hard because of Qualicon, thanks to our ridiculous cheerleader, Chelsea. So thank you for just getting the notice out there.
Yeah.
But before we leave, is there anybody who has anything to plug this week?
I was actually going to just expand on the if you want to be on the show part, because we say that a lot and we don't get a whole lot of guests. So I've been thinking about, like, how can we, like, really encourage people to like jump in. And one of the easiest ways to do that is when people have a topic that they want to talk about and they care about, and they come to us with it and they say, hey, here's this thing I care a lot about. I even have a presentation I would be happy to do, and we can talk about that. Like, those are great. If you have a specific topic that you want to talk about and you come to us with that, then, like, we will absolutely jump all over it. It's harder when I think people say, like, yeah, I'm interested, and it's just, there isn't really much to latch onto to actually move the whole thing forward. So definitely, if you have a specific topic or a specific area of expertise, or you just have a presentation that you want to share, anything along those lines, those are great things to come to us with when you want to get on the show, because we will absolutely jump on those opportunities.
Sweet. Thanks for that, Ariel. Myron.
I'd like to plug Bionic Gym. Have you heard of this thing? If I had applause available, I would do this. And I shouldn't have put it up. All right, so it's this thing where you put it on, and, like, you look like you wiggle, and you can burn like 600 calories over 2 hours, like, while doing TPS reports. It's great. So if you are happy that the gyms are open, but you're like, holy shit, I got to get in shape enough to go to the gym, Bionic Gym is an incredible way of doing it. So that's my plug because it's great. There you go.
Awesome. Thanks, Myron. Chelsea, how about you?
My plug is for a Netflix series, and it's an amazing series. It's called High on the Hog: How African American Cuisine Transformed America. It may not be available in all regions, but I'm hopeful that it is for you. And if not, get a VPN. Wait, no, I didn't tell you to do that. So
just
here's
pirate
the
it.
thing.
Wait, no, don't pirate it.
Yeah. So
You
the
figured
premise
that.
is that black food is American food, and
What on earth was that?
Sorry.
Myron pulled up the Netflix page, and that was
They blasted me.
was that Yasuke
Yes.
in the background?
Yes.
Which
they-
also you should watch.
Yes.
Is an amazing show. But Steven Satterfield traces the delicious moving through lines from Africa to Texas in a docuseries. It's 4 episodes. They're about an hour apiece. They investigate things like how rice is a part of American cuisine because of the enslaved being moved to America, and intentionally colonizers bringing it over as a comfort food. Americans would not have okra without the enslaved food movement.
Wow.
Right? So it was very impactful for me. I learned about how much of my own food history I did not understand because of this, and I think it's a great way to go back to our Black Lives Matter episode from last year of me starting to do the work in a way that is very visually representative and helps me understand my own culture as an American. So super recommend High on the Hog: How African American Cuisine Transformed America. Give it a watch.
Awesome recommendation. Awesome plug. Thank you, Chelsea. My plug for the week is to please be kind to yourself and recognize when you're burned out, and take time for yourself to do something different, to get your mind off of things and be at peace. I have had reached a point of burnout recently, and I've had to give myself that. So just a reminder to everyone. And we as a group are going to take a little bit of a break. We're going to take the month of July off, and we'll be back talking about all sorts of QA fun times in August. So if you don't see us on Twitch for a while, that's why, because we're all taking care of ourselves and having a summer break.
We're going to be on Discord, though.
Oh, yes. Yeah, we'll still be on Discord. We'll still be chatty, still encouraging conversations there, from spicy chats to professional chats, and talking about all sorts of other QA-related and non-QA-related fun. So thank you, Chelsea.
Chris Rando and I may be doing a limited edition in-person short form content from North Carolina at some point in time. So stay tuned.
Ooh.
This is the first he's hearing about this. I'm pressuring him
this is a surprise
on
to me
live,
too.
on live podcast.
Great. Great. No, that sounds wonderful. I would love that. That sounds great.
And
so
also,
I will stay tuned.
On the burnout note, though, Chris, I wanted to add a second plug. So, I recently left an organization that I thought was great, and what I will say is, if you feel that you're burned out and things aren't really going well at work, just evaluate your values and your ethics. And if you need to bring yourself out of a situation where you are being asked or demanded to compromise your ethics and your values, you're not a quitter. You believe in you have integrity, and you deserve to be you and to keep your integrity and your values, because you're awesome and no one can take that from you.
I love that, Myron. Thank you. All right. And with that, very, very deep bit of wisdom from Myron, let's call it an episode. Thanks again, everyone. Thank you for joining. Thanks, everyone, for joining us with Myron, Ariel, and Chelsea.
Thank you, Sarah.
And thank you,
Chris,
Sarah, once again. Sure. I love to. And thank you, Sarah, for running the chat and our socials. Until next time, everybody, keep playing, keep testing, keep washing your hands. You should probably wear a mask, and please get your vaccine. Take care, everybody.